episode of Ask the Experts. You will recognize this face. This is Autumn Dyck. We spoke with her about nutrition for the postpartum mother. Today, what I'd love to talk about is the female athlete. So specifically, when we're talking about nutrition and maybe nutrient depletion, deficiencies, what we often, or what you can see is something called the female triad. And this is something that I want to speak to Autumn about today, just from a nutrition perspective. So the female triad specifically is, what I'll let you know what that is. It's an energy deficiency with or without an eating disorder. And Autumn's going to unpackage that a little bit for us. As well as menstrual amenorrhea. So this means women are not getting their periods. So that could be, maybe you're getting them once every 4 months, or maybe you've gone for a year without having a period. Also, the third thing with that is bone loss. So osteopenia or osteoporosis. This is not something that, I'm not talking about osteoporosis in my clientele who is elderly. I'm talking about osteopenia or bone loss or bone density deficiency in my younger athletic clientele.
When you shouldn't be experiencing these types of symptoms. Yeah,
exactly. So I feel like this is something that I've been seeing more and more of, which is why I want to speak to Autumn about it. And we're going to kind of get into the cultural whys and that. But often in my practice, what I'm seeing is just a very high value on intense exercise. Mm-hmm. Maybe in a season where it's not actually the healthiest. Mm-hmm. And that trickles. And then also a very restrictive diet that then, what I tend to see is the loss of period. So when patients are coming to me, that's what I tend to see. So, and then when you dig a little bit deeper, you find out that there's also, this is accompanied by just having very low energy most of the time. And then if I dig a little bit deeper, there's usually an exercise component and also usually a nutrition component, which is what we're going to talk about today with Autumn Dyck. So Autumn, I'm going to just ask you maybe to tell everybody who you are, where you work, and how you work with this clientele.
Okay, my name is Autumn, and I'm a registered dietitian. I'm the owner of RD Nutrition, and we deal not necessarily only with athletes this particular circumstance, but we deal with a lot of diet culture and retraining individuals how to eat properly using intuitive eating and knowing what isn't particularly right for those symptoms like you were just talking about. So missing periods and having any type of disordered eating, feeling any type of guilt over foods that we quote unquote in culture call good and bad foods.
Right. Awesome. We're gonna unpackage that a little bit more soon. Can you just tell us what is the nutritional component? What does that look like for women with female triad?
Generally, we're seeing women because they are knowingly or unknowingly restricting their calories, or they're over exercising. So maybe they have a fairly normal caloric requirement, or they eat a fairly normal amount of calories during the day, but they're over exercising. So we could see anorexia, we could see binging and purging. And purging isn't just in a vomit, getting it out of your body, but physical activity, going back to what you said, having this over obsession of needing to be at the gym 7 days a week, or maybe that translates into 3 hours at the gym 1 to 3-4 times a day, and that is also called purging because you are purging calories.
Interesting. I did not know that. Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Yeah. Okay. let's talk a little bit about that idea of healthy eating. Okay. So it's funny, I think Autumn had come in to talk to Craig's athletes last year, and I remember Craig saying, like, nutrition, when we're talking about fitness and athletes and healthy people, is right up there with like religion and politics, like that thing that you don't talk about, because it seems like there's so many different, it's very personal. It seems like there's a lot of different opinions, and people are like very, very intensely passionate about this.
Yeah.
So can you just speak to our healthy eating culture a little bit?
Yeah.
And maybe the good, and then maybe the bad about that.
Yeah, so I'm a dietitian, so we do think that healthy eating is good for our bodies. It makes sure that we stay healthy long term, makes sure that we are getting the proper nutrition, macro and micronutrients, in order to support our bodies, ensuring that maybe we don't get any type of chronic disease, and just in general that we are functioning properly on a day-to-day basis. So healthy eating, so that's the normal, like the positives. We still want people to be reaching out for healthy foods on the majority, but we don't. From a practitioner perspective, as a dietitian, I actually don't believe that there's good foods or bad foods. I think all foods are good in our diet, because we aren't getting rid of cupcakes today, tomorrow, next year. So we need to learn how to have those foods, because culturally we gather around foods. So where I see it being taken to the extreme is definitely our world of diets currently, from paleo to keto to intermittent fasting. All of these are extremist measures in order to have an aesthetic body that people are trying to achieve. They aren't meant for any other I'll caveat keto is meant for some other neurological disorders, but as of right now, the normal population aren't using these diets, to for any of those reasons. They're mostly doing it for aesthetics, and so we can transition from healthy eating, normal eating a balanced day, week, whatever that looks like, to extremists where you can't have any of the quote unquote bad foods. And that's leading into what we call orthorexia, when you become so preoccupied with healthy foods that if you were to have any type of bad foods, it would completely ruin your day. And so our culture is leading the vast majority of us towards a place of more orthorexic tendencies. And orthorexia is just up there as the same as anorexia, as the same as bulimia in being concerned about these populations, that we need to take those people and help them understand that moderation is actually key to living a healthy lifestyle.
Talking about moderation and just a healthier relationship with food. I love that when you do speak about food, you always bring up the fact that it's our culture, it's our gathering, like we gather around food, we use it as a way to build relationships with people. And I think that if those things, or if your eating habits are taking away from how we maybe meet with others, how we build relationships with others, how we celebrate together, it could be a sign that you need to re-examine some of your thoughts around food.
Yeah, totally. You're taking words out of my mouth, because talking about quality of life.
Yeah.
And if you feel like you are feeling guilty about choosing certain types of foods over others, if you're hiding foods because you feel like those aren't the foods that you should be eating in and around people, or if you're looking at other people and thinking that their choices aren't healthy choices,
Right.
can also mean that you're clouded by the judgment of an orthorexic mentality.
Right.
That we still do eat foods for other reasons,
Yes.
whether that's comfort, emotion,
Sorry, we're having some technical. Go ahead, we're good.
whether that's emotions, comfort, just wanting to be around people. Maybe you have a tradition. We have a ton of holidays in the year, and you shouldn't feel guilty about having different types of foods included at all meals.
For sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, let's kind of go back a little bit. So thinking about the female athlete, thinking about, and also female athlete triad, is there a caloric intake, or is there kind of an optimal calories in that is required for females who are exercising?
So this is actually a difficult question to answer.
Okay.
So in general, most people who are just exercising, an hour a day or lower key just to feel healthy, expand their lungs, get some fresh air, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
Generally, we're not looking at increasing a bunch of calories. But with that being said, as soon as women decide that they're going to be exercising, the first thing that happens is we increase our exercise and we decrease our calories. So if you feel like you're constantly hungry, exhausted, your sleep is impacted, those are the things that you should be questioning whether or not you're getting enough calories in a day. From an athletic perspective, there's a wide assortment of caloric equations that we use depending on the type of activity. And then we would prescribe them with a certain amount of calories that they are required to take in. I know that that's not a specific answer.
No, that's fine.
But
I think it does depend on what you're. Should they be eating more? Like if you're exercising for more than 1 hour a day,
yes.
Should you be eating more?
Well, your metabolism is probably demanding more, so you're probably going to be more hungry. So I would listen to your hunger cues. If you find that you're restricting, or if you're finding that you worked out and then the next day you're hungry, don't say, "Oh, I'm so hungry," and then have a salad. If you're hungry, eat. Have something to eat. Your body's asking for the energy that you need to supply back. So make sure that you're actually paying attention to those hunger cues, being in tuned to what your body needs. And you're probably, if you're kind of staying even and you're not overly hungry all the time, you're probably eating enough calories for yourself. So listen to your body.
Okay, so one thing that Autumn, I know, has talked about before, I don't know if in this conversation, or maybe it's just when we've talked not being recorded, but this idea of intuitive eating, and I think this is what you're speaking to right now. So can you define what does intuitive eating mean, loosely,
Okay.
and how could that look for a female athlete?
Okay, so there's 10 principles for intuitive eating. So if you want to look them up, you can look up online the 10 principles of intuitive eating. They're all super important. This is what we use to develop healthy food relationships. So getting rid of the stigmas around quote unquote bad foods, making people feel like they can choose foods without feeling guilty about them, whether that's healthy or not, because we still have this society where even fruits can be bad. So we're trying to get rid of those food rules. And so that's one of the principles of intuitive eating is, saying no to the food police, whether that's yourself or your mom or a friend who is judging you on the foods that you are eating.
Right.
So we can also be our own food police. Getting rid of the stigmas behind food, so getting rid of the good foods and the bad foods, and including them more in moderation. This is listening to our hunger cues, so being more intuitive to our bodies itself. And as soon as we get into diet culture, we start seeing people who say, oh, I just had that salad and I'm so hungry, but I just ate 2 hours ago, so how could I still be hungry?
Right.
That is pushing those hunger cues aside and saying that your body isn't in tune with itself. So honor your hunger and honor the fact that your body is asking for food. That doesn't mean that you have to go out and have a cheeseburger. It could be that you are becoming or bringing more food with you to work so that you have access to yogurts and nuts and fruits and just more of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know that that's a really brief explanation of intuitive eating, but
I think that was excellent.
intuitive, just think of, your intuition, listening to your body more, and kind of omitting all of those food rules that we have in society right now.
I'm going a little bit off script here, but is our body ever wrong? So, you know how, like, should we always, like, every time we're hungry, should we be eating? Or I'm thinking about, sometimes I think we probably do need calories, but we don't get a hunger cue. Does that ever happen?
Yeah, sometimes we might not be as in tune with our body.
Yeah.
So that takes time. This isn't something that happens overnight. It's not like you read the 10 principles of intuitive eating and then all of a sudden you do it. Most of these can take years. You can work on one of them for a year and still feel like there's work to be had. And so on the point of eating when you're hungry, I think you should honor that. So sometimes that might look like you want a chocolate bar, and you can honor those feelings of wanting a chocolate bar. If you are then still hungry, you're probably needing something a little bit more nutrient dense. So we're not saying like
every time I feel like I need a cupcake, I should eat a cupcake. That's not what you're saying.
No, it's not. Like obviously if you're craving a cupcake, maybe that's what you want. But if at the end of that you're still hungry,
right.
Having these foods, these quote unquote bad foods, are still a healthy part of our emotional or celebratory lives.
Right.
And so maybe you're having a cupcake with some nuts and a yogurt, and now it's a more well-rounded snack.
Yeah.
And you're probably feeling a little bit more full because you have the nutrition, maybe the protein from a Greek yogurt, and maybe with the nuts you're having a little bit more fat, so you're getting filled up on that, and some fiber with that as well. So it's not... We try to get rid of the food rules, but I'm talking more of like the diet culture food rules where it's like you eat these particular types of foods and then you'll lose weight or you'll be healthy. Those are the food rules that we want to get rid of. Okay.
So speaking to the athlete,
yes.
Again, I feel like there's, lots of like nutritional supplements out there marketed towards athletes.
Yeah.
I know in past conversations you've talked about food first. Is there a time when, athletes who are training a lot, so maybe we're speaking a little bit more to our endurance athletes at this point, should be taking supplements?
Yeah, so especially elite athletes, like this is getting a little bit more into sports nutrition.
Right.
But carb supplements, so using gels and carb supplements for increasing endurance is super important. So you could be finding yourself purchasing those. Protein supplements. Generally, our Alberta population, we are getting enough protein in our diets. We are a protein heavy province.
Okay.
So generally, we don't need a ton of protein supplements. Okay. But considering that we need protein throughout the day, we try to make sure that we're getting protein at every single one of our meals. When it comes to electrolytes, so hydration is probably the number one thing that we're concerned about. Hydration, if you're working out over about 75 minutes a day, you should be concerned or considerate of your electrolyte balance. So not just drinking water is going to hydrate you. Yeah. You're sweating out electrolytes, which means that you then have to get them in
to
restore them. General population, you can get enough sodium from a regular diet, whereas it's the elite athlete that might need to, because their caloric requirements are so much higher.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So thinking about the athlete that, is working out a lot, maybe has a little bit of a restrictive diet, and maybe she's starting to feel some of these symptoms that go along with female athlete triad. So maybe tired is a big one, tired a lot. Maybe she's had a stress fracture or two kind of over the last year.
Yeah.
Her period's a little hit or miss. From a nutrition perspective, what's the first thing? What's the first step in restoring or moving forward to make sure that it doesn't become a persistent issue?
Yeah, well, if you're unknowingly doing this, if you're exhibiting these symptoms, I think that you're probably looking for answers. And so you want to reach out to someone in the dietetic field where we actually can look at your diet, make personal recommendations for yourself and for your actual specific sport, so that we can make sure that we up those calories, make sure that you're getting enough, because sports performance is indicative of how much you're getting in. So your performance could be lower, you could be tired, which is impacting your performance and those kind of things. So you're probably, that client is probably looking for answers. The one that's knowingly doing this, and this is where that tricky situation comes with wanting to perform well, but also maybe being in a sport that requires you to look a certain way. And so you're battling this, these two sides of performing well, but looking a certain way.
Yeah.
Those people first need to identify that this is an issue. So knowing what the female triad actually is, and being honest with the practitioners around you. Hiding is probably one of the worst things that you can do. And maybe talking to your physician or a practitioner that you feel comfortable around, telling them that you might be concerned that this is happening.
Right. Yeah.
And so maybe your physician might then refer you to a psychologist for psychological help, getting over barriers. Maybe there's something else that's triggering you. And then from our perspective, also coming in and getting help just to know how to eat properly and how to get the calories in. This isn't necessarily a female triad specific issue, like I keep saying. It's also women, because we tend to exercise more and decrease our intake at the same time. So if you feel like you're having these signs, symptoms, and feeling everything that we talked about, guilt, it's restricting you from going out with friends, or that you're afraid to go out because they won't have the right foods, I think reaching out to someone and getting the help that you need is a positive step forward.
For sure. Awesome. If you have any other questions about this, or if you're sitting at home and you're like, oh snap, I haven't had my period in a really long time, and like some of the things that we have said just have resonated with you, I would encourage you to just bring it up with your physician. Talk to me if you're seeing me. Shoot Autumn an email, because I think it's important to recognize that there are significant long-term health effects to experiencing these symptoms. So, we're not just talking about a minor stress fracture, when you're trying to train. We're talking about, long-term bone density issues. I know that there's a significant effect on hormone levels, on even your cardiac function. So, like, there's kind of a lot that we haven't really dived into that do go along with the female athlete triad. So if you have any questions, for sure, give us a call, give us an email, and we can talk about that, talk to your physician about it. And I think that's kind of all we have to say about it. So thank you, Autumn, for being my guest here. And if people are looking to get a hold of you, how could they do that?
Yeah, you can reach out to us on our website, www.rdnutrition.ca, email info@rdnutrition.ca. You can send us messages either way, and we can give you a call and we can figure things out.
Awesome. Until next time, have a great day.